We are the saint and the singer. I am the saint.
And I am the singer.
And cancel.
No. Yeah, it's good though.
Right, so, for real, welcome to the Saint and the Singer.
I'm Shaun and I'm the saint.
I'm Andy and I'm the singer. And tonight we are talking about anniversaries.
But I got married in August.
I got married in December. So,
How about
well, that was a great show. Thank you.
We'll talk again in December.
See you guys next month.
But how about church anniversaries?
Oh, church. That's what it was.
Okay,
Yes.
that's what. Okay.
So this last week marked our 1 year anniversary as a congregation. We had our first organized worship service on September 24th
Yes.
of 2023. And
It's crazy that it has been a year.
it is crazy that it's been a year. And
it's been a crazy year.
What a year it has been. So we thought we would kind of do sort of a quick look back on the last 12 months and some of the highlights and maybe even some of the low lights. Or have there been low lights? We'll get there.
Yeah, we'll get
we
there.
gotta think about that.
And also where we see the next year going.
And then, yes, there's a lot going on. Some of you out there who know may already know what's going on, but there's rumors and there's rumors and there's rumors, and so we're going to clear some of that up too, hopefully.
Yes.
So, well, let's get started. So 1 year ago, let's play a word association game.
Okay.
So let's talk about our feelings. Okay.
No.
Let's go back 12 months and just say the first feeling that comes to your
Is
sort
this
of being.
before we started or after?
We can go. Let's start there. Yeah. Let's
Okay.
say the 2 weeks before we started this thing.
Okay.
Where were you in your headspace? You can either pick a word or I don't know.
After September 10th.
Which, for those who don't know,
That was-
September 10th was the day that we had all been working for, which was the vote that we were encouraging our old congregation to have to disaffiliate from their denomination, which we felt was vastly leaving the orthodoxy of faith, so to speak.
Tradition
We don't have
and
to talk
scripture.
about what all was going on there, but orthodoxy was going out the window. So we were trying to encourage our brothers and sisters to vote to leave the congregation.
To stand on truth.
Not the congregation, sorry, the denomination, to stand on truth. And the evening of that vote was quite stressful until the vote was made. And so we made our little check marks on our piece of paper, and I went and sat down in peace, I think. But
At the vote, I was out in the back as the associate pastor. I could not vote. And so I was kind of pacing until the vote. But once that number was given, I knew exactly what was going to happen.
yeah,
For me, I would say my word was peace.
yeah.
Peace and focused.
Okay. Fast forward 3 days, and we have a little meeting with 40 or 50 of our closest friends who've all decided they don't want to stay. And we're discussing some thoughts about maybe where we would all like to go to church, because we don't want to split this group up any more than we have to. We feel like, as we've been a family for the last 13 plus years, we want to stay as close as we can. And that conversation went sideways real quick.
It went off the rails.
It went off the
At
rails
least off
real
of
quick.
what we thought were the rails.
Yeah.
And gotta love Phyllis standing up and says, well, we want Shaun to be the pastor and Andy to lead worship. I think at that moment, I looked like a deer in headlights when I looked at you.
Start us a church. Start us a church.
I'm pretty sure that I knew that was where we were going, But to hear it declared at that moment, it was just like,
Up until then, it was kind of a joke. We had joked about, well, we'll just start our own church, and
Yeah.
we had our fake little staff put together of all the least
Our draft team.
Yeah, our draft
Our
team was
fantasy
like
pick.
the least likely people to be in those positions, and it wasn't us that was doing that. Okay, it wasn't like we were making fun of people.
No,
but,
no.
You know, it's like Don, who is the least musical and the most. I don't know the right word, but anyway, traditional
opinion.
He asserted that he was going to be in charge of the worship music,
and there'd be no drums.
So it was you were our pastor, Don's our worship leader. I don't remember what I got relegated to, but you
were going to play for worship, but you could. He was the one who's choosing. He was
all
your
the songs
overlord
and all that stuff. So we had a whole group of people who were jokingly saying what they would do in this fake church we were making up.
I think as the summer progressed.
But wait a minute.
Okay.
When Phyllis stood up and said those words, what emotion came to your to your being at that point?
I really felt like a deer in headlights. I mean, when I looked at you and you looked at me, I'm just thinking we're like.
I panicked.
Yeah. I wouldn't say I panicked, but I think I was shocked with how fast it was going.
I panicked.
Like I said, I think deep down for me, even 3 months earlier, we were joking, but there was a part of me that recognized that this may not be a joke.
Right. And same here, but I didn't do my usual thing there, at least in those times, because usually what I do is I'm the worst case scenario person. I think of all the things that could possibly, and some of them not even possibly, go wrong. Some of them are impossibilities, but, I still think, okay, what happens if an asteroid falls on us tomorrow? But anyway, I had done some worst case scenarioing, but this was not part of that thought. So when she said that, it all flooded from all directions in my head at once. And I went, I don't know how we're going to do this. We don't know
Where do we
anything
start?
We don't even know what we're doing. So I literally said, well, Phyllis, we don't know what we're doing. We don't know how to do that. And
I remember that.
She just goes, nah, you boys are smart. You'll figure it out. And I was like, well, I guess we'll just adjourn this meeting because we got a lot of work to do. And, we had been listening to some podcasts about how to do this. And, the statement that they just kept making was, expect it to take 6 months before, from the time you form the thought that this is what you're going to do.
You build your team
you build your team, you do this, you do this, you do this, you do this. And 6 months later, you're lucky if you have your first worship service.
I think that part of me was thinking that it was going to be kind of a time, but I also knew that our body of believers, we needed to move fast.
Yeah.
Because the longer we waited, the more they would slowly disperse and find other, church bodies, which is fine.
Yeah.
But I knew that wasn't ideally what they wanted. And so for me, I think it was a matter of being on my knees. I'm like, all right, God, I am totally trusting you in all of this. That you're going to open the doors that you want to open, and you're going to close the doors you want to close. Because another part of this was also my career. There was that. But I was really at peace. Once I got over the initial, I guess we're doing this, there was that peace again that, like, okay, you know what? God is planning all of this. It's not surprising God.
I am pretty sure I didn't sleep.
I know
those 2 weeks. At all.
Yeah. Well, there was a lot to do in those 2 weeks.
Yeah, there was a lot to do in these. But we talked about this a couple of weeks ago when we talked about, or it's been more than a couple of weeks because we've been off a couple of weeks, but a couple of episodes ago we talked about miracles. And one of those miracles that I guess we really didn't talk about that was involved in this was that group of people was itself a church.
Right.
So we had a pastor, we had a worship leader, we had a person there who knew how to set up all the legal entities and get the tax stuff set up and do this and do this. We had people that were heads of corporations that know how to organize, management boards or, this sort of stuff. And so this group came together, worked together in prayer, and love for one another and love for God. And 2 weeks later, we came out into this sanctuary in the evening on a Sunday and had our first tearful, amazing worship service.
And I will tell you, that was when I was the most nervous.
Really, because
for me,
at that first notes and everybody sang, I was like, "Oh, we're doing this. This is awesome."
It wasn't so much the worship part; it was the part when I have to get up and give my message.
Give your first sermon to your new church.
Yes, I will be. I mean, it's been a year, and I'm still every, Saturday night. I'm thinking, God, the words that I'm saying, they're from you, and I know that. But dang it, God, I feel like I'm so inadequate.
Yeah.
And that's okay. I think that this keeps me humble.
That's a good thing.
I'm not.
I want you to stay feeling inadequate. I don't want you to feel, like this whole thing's about you. I don't want it to feel like it's about me or even that it's about us. It's really not even about
all about
us.
God.
It's about God. So yeah, I mean that first worship service.
The music is just
so overwhelming.
Yes,
we had come from a church where we probably had in our service anyway, there was more than one service there, but in the service that I was the most used to, we probably had about the same number of people that we have here now, 60 to 80 at that time, but it was a much bigger room.
Yeah, that could seat like 300
and to
or
put
400.
All these people in that room that close together and to be able to hear the voices. I mean, at the other place, you couldn't really do that. You didn't really experience that. There was so much space in the ceiling and all this other stuff that just absorbed all that. Whereas here, it's just like it's in your face. And from where I stood, I could have just played the guitar and listened to the congregation sing, and there were not a dry eye in the house, I think, by the time.
And I think the song choices that were definitely intentional, and even my message was very intentional, because at this point we didn't have a name yet for a church.
We didn't know what our church name was.
We just knew that we are coming together. You and I set up. You did most of the work for setting up the 501(c)(3).
I did no work setting that up. I just named it.
Okay, well you named it, which no one's liked it for our church name. We tried, but they didn't like. So our youth ministries named it. The word is doulos, which is the Greek word for bond servant or slave. Yeah, which I'm still thinking about getting for a tattoo.
Let's do it together. I'm doing it at some point.
I'm actually thinking about getting on my leg.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay,
I'm in.
I'm supposed to take Zoe to get one, so I was thinking about going and getting it here.
I'm taking Allison to get one, so we may just all do that together.
We'll go to Republic and do it.
You don't want to know about this anyway.
Sorry, yeah. Well,
but anyway,
apologize.
We'll probably get tattoos.
Side notes.
Whatever.
But so we ended up calling our 501(c) doulos Monette.
Yep.
We're bond servants in Monette, and I think it's a very good thing. But that was not what the church name was. So at this point, we don't have a name yet.
Yep.
All right. So we're still trying to figure all of these things out. And so I mean, it was one of those things. Is I didn't even know what I didn't know at that moment.
I'm not sure that a year later we still know what we don't know.
Yeah,
I'm sure there's something coming that we don't know about yet.
Yeah, well, I guarantee it. But the being in the church building and just having that first meal, just to see the sparkle in everyone's eyes and just the camaraderie and the true biblical fellowship.
Yeah.
And I really focused and leaned on that, what that Acts 2 church looks like in that first sermon.
Yep.
As we talk about, like, what does the early church look like? How did they do it?
What is this thing we're building, and how is it different than where we've been?
Yeah. We really are leaning into what it means to be the family of God. And at that moment, I felt it.
I did too, and I think everybody in that room did, because I remember hearing people say that I just felt like I was coming home. I felt like this was where we were supposed to be, and this is what we're supposed to be doing. So it's been that first service. I don't know if I would call that the peak of this thing, because I think we've experienced some wild stuff in the last year.
I would think that was the first plateau.
It was amazing.
The first step.
That'll be, until Alzheimer's takes my memory, that will be a high point in my memory in my life.
Absolutely.
That was amazing.
I think everybody was happy but Megan. And that's because she had to deal with, she knew that she was getting pigeonholed into children's ministry. And she's like, I just want to get away from the children's ministry. and thankfully now she is slowly able to start doing that. But at that moment, I think she was just trying to she loved it. but there were parts of it. She's like chasing the little, was
Yeah.
hard. So
Yeah.
that was one of those things that we had to figure out over the course of the years.
And I think that's one of those things we're still figuring out.
Yeah, I think we're still trying to figure out how do we
working on that.
look at that. And I think we're figuring things out, and we're getting there though. But so that was that first. So next word association. Okay. I'm trying. So the first board meeting where we got together with this was our church plant board. All right. So this is
board.
This is not our official board. So these are Andy and I were intentional in asking several couples. We had what? We have 4 couples besides, I think there was 10 of us.
Yeah, there's yeah.
And so we tried to get different age groups
Yep.
of couples to come in and to kind of see, like, so we could try to hit all demographics. So our youth pastor, at the time he wasn't a youth pastor, him and his wife were our young couple. And then JD and Pam were the old, and then Don came in and kind of, he wasn't necessarily officially, but he just kind of came in and
he came in to make sure we didn't put a drum kit in the sanctuary.
But Don had some great insight, and so
he's always got great
Yes.
input. Once you get past the dry humor and the sarcasm, and he's like me. You have to have a couple of conversations to figure out, okay, did he mean that?
He's
Did
pulling
he
your
not
leg
mean
97%
that?
of the time.
So when you can pull out the things he actually means
Yes.
from the rest of it, amazing human being. So glad he's here with us.
So that first meeting where we all sat together after service in that little alcove.
Yeah.
What was your thought at that point? Word association.
Overwhelmed, which might be the key word for the last year for me, is overwhelmed, and both in a good way and a not as good way. I mean, there's more ways to be overwhelmed,
Sure.
but yeah, I mean, it was like once we had done that, we go, yeah, we're here, and then we go, we have so much work to do and so much to figure out, because we started with this vision of just church is going to be this and we don't have to think about anything else, and then we get smarter people than us in the room and they're going, well, we're going to have to do insurance policies and procedures. Oh, do we bylaws? Do we have this and this? How are we doing finances and blah, blah, blah. And to that point, we didn't have any finances. We hadn't taken a collection.
Yeah, well,
yet. So we didn't even take a collection the first sermon. The first
and I
service.
got grief for that by Dr. Scott. He's like, why didn't you have offer? I was like, well, I gave him my reason. He goes, well, that was stupid, Sean.
yeah, but I thought it was the right
Scott
thing to do, though.
It was like 96 years old, and a pillar in the community,
Yep.
and one gentleman that I deeply respected, and we had a great relationship. But when he told me that, I'm like, yeah, I didn't think about that. Sorry, Dr. Scott, but I remember that.
But I kind of thought it was the right way to go.
I do too. I don't regret it.
Because we didn't have any of that stuff. If we'd have taken we did have a checking account by then. I did make sure we had a checking account.
It had $0 in it.
But it had $0 in it, which was part of that other miracle that we talked about of this building itself. Was we didn't have a place to worship. I mean, we didn't have money, a place to worship. We had nothing. We just had an idea that this is what everybody wants to do. We're going to figure out if we can do it or not. So
basically, we were coming with grit and the Holy Spirit, and that was it.
Yeah, a hope and a dream, and a lot of prayer.
Yeah. I think at that first meeting, I was just like the same way overwhelmed. It was just to the point where I'm like, there is so much to even think about that I'm not a business-minded person. Yeah. I'm a people kind of person. And so for me, I'm like, I am so out of my element.
I think when I went and got in my Bronco and I closed the door and I pushed the start button, I might have had this big exhale and said to myself, what have we done?
Yes.
I mean, it was so scary. It's like, what have we done? Like, we had a wonderful first service, right? And then you go, now we have all this other stuff to figure out. How are we going to do all this? Mm-hmm. And again, God threw the right people in the mix
Absolutely.
to go, no, don't worry about it. We'll get this done. We had sort of this division of duties based on what everybody's specialties were kind of, and it just, I wouldn't say it just fell into place, because that would be
oversimplifying.
It would be way oversimplifying, and it would be probably dishonoring all of the hard work that all these other people did to do this. But it, from my perspective as what would we call ourselves, an organizer or a whatever
founding
you want to call
member.
it, a founding member, from my perspective, it all felt and looked like it just fell into place where it was supposed to.
Yes.
And you know, Jack Williams, he's now the chairman of the elders board here, but he was also on that transitional board, and he was a lifesaver. I mean, he's the one that got us
this building, for one thing.
Right. And you know, he has a wealth of knowledge on how to run an organization, and you know, he took a lot of the things that we had no inkling of an idea of what to do, and just took it and ran with it. And he has done such a wonderful job, and we probably have not expressed a sufficient amount of appreciation to Jack. And if you are crazy enough to watch our podcast, which I doubt, because you're kind of a smart person and you have your life together for the most part, thank you. Because,
Absolutely.
I mean, without Jack, I don't think we were successful.
I definitely don't think it would have gone as fast, for sure.
I think we would have bumbled around for months and screwed a bunch of stuff up and had to redo a bunch of stuff. And, you know, and that's one way to learn, right? But he just took on some of the stuff that we didn't know how to do and just made it so smooth.
Yes.
So
absolutely. And I think that by the third meeting, I was ready to. At that point, I was excited. I'm like,
I was like, okay, we got this.
We got this.
This is coming together.
Yeah. And I can't remember now how fast it was before we actually officially started our elder board. Was it 2 months that we had bylaws, or was it 3 months? Was it January? I can't remember if it was December or January.
Wow.
I know it's been.
Well, I feel like it was January, because I think that's
so.
close. That's basically what we're looking at for our elections, for our nominations and election for elders is January.
Yeah. So we had our bylaws written within 3 months.
Yeah.
We had we started with our what we believe.
Yeah.
We really nailed that down. And I think that was a good starting place.
Yep.
To really do, what do we stand upon?
Yeah, shout out to Christ Church NWA and my former pastor, Carnus Vaughn, for kind of shepherding us and allowing us to use some of their wording and thoughts for the what we believe. We had this idea of how we wanted to organize it, and we leaned on other churches who have done this same sort of thing and were ahead of us. They're about 6 months ahead of us. So I contacted Carnus, and he was gracious enough to kind of push me in a direction. And then when I looked at what we believed, it was like, okay, that's exactly what we're trying to do. Can we use some of the wording and some of your stuff so that we're not reinventing the wheel? Because this is perfect, and all we're going to do is, you know, you don't want to do like you do in high school, is you copy something, change a couple of words, you know.
Didn't plagiarize.
So they were very gracious.
Yeah. And we did add a few things here and there. We changed a few things. But
it's not word for word, but
the general idea,
a lot of it is very close, and it gave us, now we had kind of this North Star from which to operate, to figure out everything else. So, shout out Carnus. So then became all of the money worries for me, because I'm a banker and I'm starting to think of, okay, well, at some point we should probably have some money coming in so that we can pay for stuff, because we're going to have to pay for stuff eventually, right? And so I'm starting to obsess over, we don't have a budget. We don't, and our giving, we're not in the early part of it, I'm not even sure we were very organized in our giving thing, as far as like sometimes we had it played out, sometimes we didn't. Sometimes it was part of the worship service,
Right.
and part of it just got overlooked because we were just so overwhelmed with trying to get everything done. So that's something we didn't really talk about in the miracles episode, but every time I would start getting obsessed and worried about what are we going to do. I don't even know how much to expect every week or every month. So how do we know how to budget? Every time I would go, is this even going to work? God would kind of slap me across the head and send me a $10,000 check or a $5,000 check. Or we had a couple, like in that first month, we had some very generous people throw in some serious seed money into this thing. Well, serious in my estimation. It may not be serious to everybody. Our budget is still very small, but people really stepped up and showed their trust in us and the transitional board and all that sort of stuff by so generously giving that I just went, I'm going to quit looking at the checking account. God's got this. He's slapped me upside the head enough times to be like, okay, I get it. You got this. Shut up, sit down, let you work. Got it. And that's something that I'm not used to. And I tell people a lot when they ask me what this process has been like, and I talk about it a lot, is that when I've learned to trust God in ways I've just never had to before. And his provision and his grace and his love for his obedient children is unbelievable in ways that I just would never. I mean, I'm a control freak. If my finances are not where I want them to be, what do I do? How am I going to fix this? What am I going, that sort of stuff. And it was like, God's like, dude, you're not going to do this. I'm going to. And I was like, no. Okay. Yeah, right.
And so I'm the kind of the opposite. So we had a lot of conversations at this point.
Yeah.
I'm like, God, I believe that, God has established us. We're going to be fine.
Yeah. And I'm thinking, I know this, Shaun, but I don't know how he's going to do it, and I need to know how this is going to work. So just. Ugh.
I think that I was perfectly fine as soon as I had that one couple that came and said, my mother passed away. I did her funeral a couple of years before, or a year before, and a great godly woman, and they said, my mom would love what you are doing here. She had set aside some money that she wanted to give to the church, and we feel that this is what we want to give to you. And when we received that, and it was, it was a significant amount of money for having nothing, and then all of a sudden having something with several zeros on it, we're like, oh,
yep.
I think at that moment I'm like, okay, God. And then after that, then there was, from this area and this section, and we had this multiple, and all of a sudden we had thousands of dollars in the bank, to start us off. And we're like,
and what scared me the most, if I'm just really honest, I was not worried about paying for communion elements or paying the electricity bill or whatever. But you had stepped out from your sole source of income, essentially, your main source of income. My main source,
90% of my income.
To this.
Right.
And I'm laying awake going, how am I going to keep my friend and pastor fed and watered and his kids have food and clothes and how I need to know in my head, not my heart, my head, that we're going to be able to financially support you so that you can focus on this. And that was my one concern for the first month or two.
Right. You were actually more concerned than I was.
I know, but that's my job.
That's okay. I appreciate that. That's why we make such great friends and we're brothers in Christ.
And so all that other stuff is like, if we've just got enough. So the moment we had enough in the checking account that I could have written you a check for the whole year and of your salary at one time, I was like, I'm done thinking about this. Let's move on.
I remember that conversation.
That did not take very long.
It did not.
We don't pay you what a nearly for what you
I am
do.
happy
and
with
we
what I
don't
get
pay
paid.
you what a big church pays their pastor at all. But
I don't need that.
when we go from $0, I've got to think to myself, we have to fix this, right? And I know we didn't do anything, right? Again, but that in my head, I'm going, man, we got to figure this out because he can't be doing this for $0, and I need to know that we're going to be able to count on this thing to pay your salary. And once we did, it was like, I got it. All right, I get it.
Well,
Let's
so at
do
this point, I was already looking. So being a bivocational, I'm like, okay, I'm going to go back into counseling.
Yeah.
And so I figured I'll just do that. So I was calling about how to get my counseling license back. And then they're like, well, you take a whole nother class. I'm like, oh. So like, okay, well, I mean, that was shot down. But, then it was all of a sudden, we're like, and you know what? The money's there. God took care of it. And so,
Yeah. Yes, he did.
And honestly, he removed me from my old position much faster than I thought also.
Yeah.
But again, that was all part of his plan and for his glory. So
Yeah, that was not one of my finer days. I don't know about you, but that was not one of my finer days.
I was slightly annoyed on my son's birthday and getting a call that, hey, we're going to accept your resignation early and you can, leave.
Don't bother coming back.
2 days before our first service.
Yeah. I might not have handled that as well as he did.
Again,
we don't need to talk about that, but I absolutely didn't handle that as well.
Well,
as you
again,
did.
I recognized that God was over all of it, and so at this point, I am fully living, trusting that God is going to hear it.
And I'll be honest, I'm so glad we didn't stay there till October.
Yes.
Now, looking back on it,
It happened exactly how it needed to happen.
Having to do both of those would never have worked, but
no,
that's okay.
God knew what was best, and
we love our people down the street.
We do,
but I had a bad day. I said some things.
I remember packing it up,
and I had actions. Well, that sounds bad. I didn't have actions, but I had words.
And we loaded up all your musical gear and put it in the back of your Bronco and drove away.
I think the way
took my toys.
The nice way I described it was I'm taking my toys and going home.
Yep. I remember you saying that on the parking lot.
We'll leave it at that.
Yes.
But yeah, not my finest day.
Yeah, we were all works in progress.
I have adequately repented of that, so yes. I think we're good. But so then next, the wild and crazy, and we have already discussed this again. We're going to refer back to the miracles episode a lot.
Absolutely. Because that's such a part of our identity and just our journey.
I don't remember if it was the second or third service, but then the miracles start.
Third service.
I think it was the third one.
Yes. It was after we had our name already, because the second service established our name.
Oh, yeah. And so... and the name is Connection Point Church, by the way, if we haven't said it in a while on the podcast.
Connected in Christ.
Connected through fellowship.
No, it's connected by fellowship.
Oh, connected by fellowship. Yes.
Connected through discipleship.
Yes. Yes. Obviously, my recall is not so great.
It's been a year.
I look at it only like 100 times a week. I don't know why. It doesn't stick. Probably for the same reason my wife has to tell me stuff many more times than once.
Yeah, probably.
So then the miracles start, and then we really start getting...
I think that's what ignited.
I was going to say the word was ignited, and it's not just like I saw something and I think it's a miracle. We all experienced it together as a family.
Yeah,
and there were, again, it was kind of like going back to the first service where it was like there was not a dry eye in the house for that service, and it was like we about to do something. Well, God's about to do something, but you felt
God's about to use us.
Something lit up, and,
yes,
and then. Continually, we continue to see stuff over the year that just reinforces that this obedience and this attempt to please God is being rewarded. Not necessarily financially, but we are seeing things that are deepening the faith and the belief of the people who are attending this church, and it is strengthening the spiritual fitness of the people of this church like nothing I've ever witnessed.
What would you say was the first milestone that you would say that this church, I don't want to say, I don't know if successful is right, but is going to succeed? Where would you say that first moment for you was like, we are going to do this, and it's going to be,
Well, I mean,
God's going to use us.
I mean, really, it was the first service for me. I was like, this can actually work, because up until there, I had my doubts. I mean, it was like so we'll rewind here a little bit. So that meeting that Phyllis told us that, she wanted us to start a church. So we were not expecting more than 15, 20 people. So
right.
we reserved a
fairly
small meeting room at the YMCA. And you and I and our wives stood in that room for a good few minutes, and it was empty. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking to myself,
we are in trouble.
This is, we're going to see a dispersion. This is not, this may not work. And then one family shows up, then another family shows up. And it's like, okay, this could work.
Then we had to go get more chairs. Then
we're going like, okay, we got to find more chairs. And then people are still coming through the door. And then and then when all the chairs are full, people are standing in the back of the room, squished up against each other. And I just lost it. I mean, it was like, okay.
There was over 50 people in that room. Yeah,
there were 50 people in that room that's probably supposed to seat 20 or 30. And I lost it. I was like, okay. Yeah. People are interested in this, but the first real service that we did in here solidified for me that we had something special and that this would work. I still had questions,
sure,
and still had doubts, but I'm standing up there listening to, I think that night we probably had 80, 85 people in the room, all singing together, and the sound in that room was so overwhelming that I quit singing for a minute and just listened, and I was like, okay, this will work, and this will work really well, as long as my mantra is this is going to work so well as long as we don't screw it up.
Yeah,
so let's not screw it up.
Let's not screw it up. We did talk about that quite a bit,
a lot. And that's still kind of that's my only real remaining fear right now with this, is that we do something to screw it up.
Yeah.
But
Lord, don't let us screw it up.
Yeah. I pray about that a lot.
I do too.
But yeah, I think for me it was that first service. It was just like, dude, this is beautiful. Everybody is on board. They're enthusiastic about it. This is a different thing than what we're used to, and it is beautiful.
For me, I don't know, I think that was one of them, but I think the biggest one for me that really solidified that this is going to work is our first Wednesday night. So not even the Sunday, but the Wednesday night when we split up for Bible studies, and to see the women and the men and the youth group, and the children's. I'm thinking, when we had like almost 80% of our regular attenders, I think it was about 75% of our regular attenders coming on Wednesday night for deep Bible study, I'm like, this is going to be different.
Yeah, because we weren't planning to do anything on Wednesday night for a long time. We were just going to do Sunday nights, and then we were trying to stay, quote unquote, out of the way of our other congregation, because we really were not trying to.
We're not
compete or damage or do anything. So we picked a time that didn't compete with their service times. Then we weren't going to do Wednesdays, at least for a while, because we were planning on staying there and helping them till they found replacements. And so by the time the first service had happened, we didn't even have a plan for Wednesday. And then, we went, well, okay, we'll do Wednesday.
I think it was about 2 weeks later. We're like, we can't let the youth go. It was for the youth first.
Yeah, because we had a bunch of kids showing up. So, that first Wednesday was like, oh, and at that time we didn't really have what you'd say enough data to come up with an average, but we would have maybe said on a low worship we were probably doing 50, and on a high maybe 70.
Yes,
and then we were having 25 to 30 on Wednesday nights or better.
I'd say better.
Once
The
these
men's
days
groups,
we got a lot more than that.
yeah, I'd say at that first time, I mean, there was about 9 women, 15 to 16 youth, 5 adults helping out with youth.
Yeah.
You know, and then there was 5 children.
And then I don't remember how many of the men.
Men's kind of started kind of trickled in a little bit low. They were a little bit slower start, but then they started about 5 or 6, and then it kind of grew from there. But I think at that, when I saw Wednesday nights, and I think really a lot of it was our women's ministry more than anything. When I saw, you know, and this was my wife's passion, and her passion is really inductive studying of the Word.
Yeah.
And to see her take these women who've never really done this before. Yeah. I mean, they did Beth Moore studies, or they did, you know, they kind of
someone else is doing all the work for you, kind of. Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not putting that down at all. But to see these women actually take the book of Jude and mark their Bible and really just dive in and what is being said here, and then to kind of see them kind of like aha moments. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm like, oh, this is what I knew. Yeah, that God is going to do something great.
Yeah. Yeah. Well. Yeah, that, and then when we started having meals every Sunday, that was pretty awesome.
No, the meals were always good too. I do miss the Sunday night meals.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna lie. Looking forward to our potluck on Sunday.
Yes, sir. Okay, so that's a pretty good recap of the year. Everything else after that point has been, other than the crazy miracles and things we've been seeing, that the work God's been doing, we have kind of settled into a pretty decent rhythm. We went several months with doing Sunday evenings at 5 o'clock. Then our host I'm going to call them our host family. We sound kind of like exchange students.
Yeah.
We're searching for a pastor, and I had asked you to do some filling in. So it eventually got to the point where this guy was preaching for the Presbyterians on Sunday morning and then preaching for us on Sunday evening. So that went on for, I don't know, several months, right?
Well, January to May, to the end of May.
Yeah, so 4 or 5 months. And then eventually it just became obvious that we should just all be worshiping together. So I think it was April that we started worshiping together on Sunday mornings. I feel like it was April.
Well, okay, so I think it was Mother's Day. Wasn't that the first one?
That's right. So it was the first, yeah.
But we didn't officially. That was just we just did the Mother's Day together.
We did Easter.
We did Easter. Okay, that's right.
Easter together. We did Christmas and Easter together.
Yes.
And then Mother's Day together because of all the scheduling stuff that goes along with all that, and mothers didn't want to come back to church on Sunday and all that good stuff. Sunday night and all that stuff, and then we started thinking about, hey, what do you think about, for June? So we officially started our first combined service in June. Yeah. Okay. Our regular service. Yeah. But since then we've been worshiping all together in the same room. Yes. Which I think has been amazing for everybody. Oh yeah. So that's what we're doing. We're mixing it up. We're doing a blended service. We are trying to, I guess you might say, hit all the needs that our congregation feels like they have to have a little bit of what's the right word? Congruency with what they're used to. I don't know. That's the wrong way. Yeah. To put it, well, things that they're comfortable with. But also ways to stretch them. Yeah, that's the point. That's what. That's exactly the point. I want to stretch the younger generation to learn and appreciate the classic hymns, and I want to stretch the older generation into an appreciation for the stuff that touches the new generation. I think that brings us closer together, and I wish we would do something like that in our daily lives and our politics and everything else too. But so that's kind of what's going on there. That was more of a shortening of the timeline a little bit. We spent a lot of time talking about the first couple of months of this thing, and so we've been worshiping together now for several months, and we're celebrating our first year together, and we're getting ready to celebrate another new milestone. And I think I will let you talk about the new milestone.
So because I was asked to the first part was just to help with the pulpit, not as necessarily the full pastor or anything like that, but to help with their pulpit and to be a consistent pastor for a time. I developed a good relationship with First Presbyterian. I feel like it's one of,
Do me a real quick favor and make sure that is plugged in. It looks like it's trying to unplug.
That click did not sound good.
It did not. I think it's been recording
Okay.
this whole time. It seems like it was, but that would be really embarrassing.
I mean, you checked me, and so
I did. It would be really embarrassing
Yes.
to have that happen. But anyway, sorry.
Okay.
Go ahead.
No,
So you were
yeah.
acting as a temporary.
So I was
pulpit.
acting as their temporary, pastor and kind of just helping out. And then they were basically came to the point where they're like, well, we really want Shaun as the pastor. We really want me. And it was, which is really cool, to be able to develop that kind of relationship and everyone wants to be desired and wanted, I guess, but it felt good. And so through that though, there was a growing group of them that recognized that their church was not going to grow in a traditional sense. That at this point they were down to 18 people with, and they'd been struggling for a while. They'd been looking for about 2 years for a pastor to be full time. And they had asked me, but I was not willing to join the denomination.
Right.
I did not feel that was where God was leading me through prayerful consideration. It wasn't just an easy, answer, but I did have to give it prayerful consideration. I did not feel that was where God was leading me, but I was willing to do whatever I could to help them and assist them. And so through a long series of discussions, I mean, this has been a process for a while,
Months.
and not by any pushing from connection point.
Yeah.
Okay. First Presbyterian Church has made the decision, which they just voted last Sunday, to leave their denomination of ECO and to merge and join with us as one body. And basically the reasoning, and as one of the gentlemen said, it's not necessarily, there were some that were really rejoicing in the thing, and there were some that are kind of grieving it, but they recognize that this is where the future is headed. Yeah. This is where God is leading them. And so it's a difficult decision in many cases, but I think many of them recognize that God has opened this door for both of us.
Yeah.
As Jack said, at our elders meeting, he says, we have weaknesses, they have weaknesses, but we fit together well, and we cover each other's strengths and weaknesses. And so we bring things to the table, they bring things to the table.
Rocky where it goes, I got gaps, she got gaps. Together, we got no gaps. I think that's the way he puts it, and I think it's pretty eloquent.
I think it's, absolutely that, I forgot that, that was punch drunk, but yes, that is definitely a good way of putting it. There was some wisdom there.
I feel like that's kind of how we live, as punch drunk these days. So that's pretty fitting.
Yeah, I can give that. I can definitely get on board with that.
Yeah.
So we are now in the process of figuring out what it's going to look like come January 1st.
Yeah.
So we sat down, several from, Connection Point and several from First Presbyterian and myself sat down and just looked at a rough estimate of budget. Like, these are the things that FPC has paid for. These are things that we have paid for. Where do they overlap? We can scratch things. Where do we are we adding things? And it was both exciting and exhausting.
It's a mind-numbing process, but it was good to have those conversations, because I think it kind of solidified that we're not after your assets. As a matter of fact, it was my goal for us to not have any of their assets.
That was my thing.
My goal was to this fellowship has a long, storied history. They have
since 1888.
Yeah, they have. Yeah, it's almost as old as this town is.
It's 136 years.
Yeah, and so they have worked and bled and sweat for this place and the assets that they have amassed through their faithful giving and their prayerful giving. And so we wanted to honor that and say, look, we don't want that. As a matter of fact, if I had my way, I'd probably say we refuse that. So there, we are working some ways out that through that process that their assets are going to stay separate from ours, so that we honor their tradition. And so that was very important to me that that it was clear to everyone and that there was no appearance that we were coming in here and hijacking what they're doing and then trying to take what they have worked so hard to build. And so we really want to honor that. I think there's some plans over the next few months to honor that.
Yes.
Through some, I don't know everything, so I guess I won't say much about that, but there will be some things that we're going to do to honor their history and honor everything that they have worked for as an appreciation for all of their generosity that they have just laid on us, because we were I'm going to get sad here first, not sad, but emotional here. We were a hurting group of wanderers in the wilderness.
Yeah.
And they opened up their doors and their hearts to us, and that means the world to me.
Correct.
And I don't want to do anything to dishonor that. I want to do nothing but honor that. So, we're going to have to figure out a way to recognize that for those who are not as enthusiastically coming along with this, we really want to emphasize that the expression of our gratitude could never be enough for what they've done.
Yeah, and I think the way I would explain it is that their history is our history now.
Yeah.
We take that history and we want to stand upon that history, and we take our previous history from our background, and both of these become our new history. And I think that that's a beautiful thing that we're standing upon.
It's wonderful.
Decades and decades and decades of faithful believers and brothers and sisters in Christ.
Yeah.
And I think that helps. And I think when they started when we were all sitting in there, and yes, nobody's getting the exact service that they necessarily want, because we are blending.
Right. Yeah, but at the end of the day, that's also not who we're trying to please. And I think I think we need to stay pretty firm and pretty clear on that. That yes, we are accommodating certain needs and desires for worship, as long as we feel like they fall into line with we're trying to please God here.
There are some that don't like that we do communion every week, but we're basically kind of saying tough. That's something that we value, and here's why we value. And it's not that I just say tough, but we explain why we value that, and then they're like, okay. And they always have the choice of not getting up and taking communion, but everyone.
We're never going to judge you for not feeling like you want to take communion.
That's biblical. If you don't feel like you're in the right spot to do it, don't take it. Do it.
And so, but we are going to offer it every week.
Sure.
And I think there's a tendency to look at communion as this is kind of your membership re-upness, and if you don't take it, there's something wrong with you. I don't think that's the case at all. I mean, sometimes you do have to examine yourself and go, I've got this thing going on with me that I really haven't cleared up between me and God. Maybe I shouldn't do this today. But then I also feel like even in those cases, doing communion, even if I feel like there's something there that's just not quite right yet, it brings me closer.
Right.
And so it brings me closer so that I can address that and get back right. And I just think it's a beautiful thing, and I'm so glad we're doing it.
I do too. I think that it's something that, if you'd asked me as a kid, I wouldn't have thought about it, but as an adult looking back, I see the beauty, because communion's not just about confession.
Right.
there's also the component of Thanksgiving that you are fellowshipping with the creator of the universe that loves you dearly. And so
yeah, you can look at it as if you're watching the Passion of the Christ at the hardest hour of the movie to watch, right? You can look at it like that. And that is
a very appropriate
proper way to look at that
at times.
And then you focus on the suffering and the pain and the sacrifice. But then you can also look at that on Sunday. And Sunday is a reason, Friday is the reason to mourn and be sad and really observe yourself and think, this is a dumb question because we're not, but am I worthy of that sacrifice? That's not really what you're looking at, but that's a way you can look at it as, I'm not worthy of that sacrifice. So my gratitude is immense that you did it anyway. But there's also Sunday, and Sunday is a time for celebration. So you can look at communion in more than one way,
and both of them are valid,
and they're both appropriate. There's probably several ways you can look at it. Those
it's
are
a form of worship.
The two main ones for me is I will sometimes sit and be very inward looking and self-reflective and thinking about the pain and the suffering. And then there's other times when I'm like, yes, we get to take communion because I get to commune with the God and the Father and the Spirit and the congregation all together as one. It's a meeting of all of these entities all in one place in a corporate form of communion. And it just gets, I love it every time. I don't care how you look at it. There's more than one way to do it, and it's a beautiful thing.
Well, and we even do communion in different ways. Some, usually we will do intinction, but on the first of the month, which goes back to, it's where you dip the bread into the cup. Big theological word there for layman's terms. Layman's terms is you put the bread in the cup and then you eat the soggy bread. Which really I think is a beautiful way because that's much more probably traditional. They didn't have little tiny cups for, back at in Acts, but that's okay. Actually, they probably just drink out of the same cup. They just pass it around.
They probably did.
We don't do that because of COVID and
more
RSV
in line with what the Catholics and the Lutherans.
Yeah.
They do the one cup too. Yeah, it'd probably be similar to that. I would say from a traditional standpoint, but
we don't do that. I'm not going to. No offense, I don't want to drink.
I know these people. I ain't drinking.
I trust them, but I don't want to drink after them. I'm playing. But on the first Sunday of the month, which is when our Presbyterian brothers and sisters traditionally had their communion, we are doing it kind of a much more, with the little individual cups and the little pieces of bread. But what we've started doing is we're having everybody wait, and as one body, we take communion. And it's because that's another beautiful way, again, that one body coming together in one spirit with one Lord and one faith. And so... it's been cool. I think that seeing that, but I do. Yes, there are some things. I think there are some people that don't necessarily like how it's a little different, and change can be scary.
Well, and that is the thing. This is different than what all of us.
All of us, yet no one isn't.
Right. So our what's ironic? Okay,
a little too ironic.
I'm going to call this ironic. Yeah. Was that when we were trying to convince our brothers and sisters down the street that the right thing to do was to leave that denomination, our intent was to change nothing about what was going on over there. It was other than just basically
cut and paste.
Take part of the name off of the door and the sign and continue on with what we're doing, right?
Right.
That all changed when we did this. I think we had enough time to sit and discuss, and quite frankly, over the 2 decades that I had been a member of that denomination, there were things about it that never set right with me, and that things that I thought were missing, but I didn't really have any influence over that, and it just didn't work out. So there was never a plan to change what was going on there. But once we got here and started analyzing, and somebody says, "Hey, build us a church," and we're like, "We don't know how." So, well, let's go back to the blueprint and see how church was done. And so we look at Acts 2, and some other stuff throughout not the Gospels, but the epistles and stuff,
and First Timothy and Titus for elders,
Titus, and all that stuff. And we look at how the original church was set up, and we go, maybe that's not a bad template. So we did almost kind of redefine everything about how we've done church. And so really, for all of us, it's different than what we've ever done. It's different than the tradition I grew up in, which was very different than the one we left. It's very, there are aspects of I would say my old traditions that have crept into here, because it is also their desire to do church today as if it was done 2,000 years ago. So some of that's come back, and we've kept some of the other philosophies and methods of our prior denomination, plus we've added some of the things that made the Presbyterians feel more comfortable. And so we're really doing church differently than everybody in the room has ever done it. So there has been maybe some, if we want to call them, if we're doing high points and low points, some of the, I wouldn't even call them low points. They're compromises, really, other than anything else. I don't know that I've had a low point here yet. I feel like this is the most spiritually energized I've ever been in my life, so I wouldn't call anything a low point here. But there've been some difficult discussions and some compromises about some of these things here. So there are people that are doing things they're not used to doing. They're seeing things they're not used to seeing. Some people are from a very quiet, low key, laid back tradition. And there are people with their hands held high and their eyes closed, and
we don't have any tambourines
doing
yet.
Doing their things. I don't bring that up, because don't manifest that. Okay, but
name it and claim it, huh?
Seriously, I mean, we have a very good blending of different things, and I find that to be beautiful.
I agree.
I always, anytime I think I might start getting a twinge of like, I don't know about that, I'll think back to 2 Corinthians that Paul talks about the body a lot, but where he talks about, if the whole body were an eye, where would your sense of hearing be, or where would your sense of smell be? So if we were all doing the same thing, we wouldn't really be acting as the body. We would be acting as just one big part of the body. So we have different skills, different giftings, different ideas, different thoughts, different voices, different whatever, in order to build a full body. So anytime I go, what about, no, that's good. This is just a different piece of the body getting what it needs. And so we probably should be wrapping this up pretty soon. We're pretty much to the end. Is there any other news other than the merging of,
I mean, that's
congregations? That's our next big thing. And I will tell you, we're working, and we're going to do it right, or we're not going to do it.
Yeah.
And so we're working both. So both of our leadership groups are working diligently to get this done right
and fair. Everyone have a voice.
Yeah. So we want to ensure that everything is fair and done right. But that is a big thing for us, and that's I'm back to saying it's both exciting and terrifying again. So
I think there's always a slight, you go on a roller coaster because it's exciting and terrifying.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of those things that we've strapped in and we're holding on, and we know that the loop is coming up, and we're okay with that.
Back to our tension, we God is both loving, and I would promise you that if he would reveal himself to us today, we'd be terrified.
Mm-hmm.
So same thing. I mean, that's just the whole thing about this is we worship a God that comes down to our level and loves us on an individual basis, but also
it's holy.
Essentially spit suns and stars out of his mouth when he spoke to create the universe. So if you don't think that was probably pretty terrifying or would be pretty terrifying, I think you haven't thought about it.
I would love to be able to go back and just kind of watch a snapshot of that.
Yeah.
Moon.
Woo. Yeah, so that'd be Beetlejuice. That'd be pretty sweet. Just as long as he didn't say
he only says it once.
Beetlejuice.
Right.
Anyway, so I think that pretty much sums up our year. It has been a roller coaster, but it's been a fun roller coaster.
But it has been a fun roller coaster, and God has revealed himself over and over and over again of always being faithful.
Yeah, and I will tell you, I hope this doesn't sound harsh, but we went through a lot of pain and a lot of suffering and a lot of tears and a lot of worries. I would do it again 1,000 times out of 1,000.
Yes.
Do not regret it at all.
I don't either. I mean, I do
regret some of the consequences of what we chose to do, and some of the hurt that has occurred from that. But I would do it again and again and again and again and again without hesitation.
Right. I would do some things differently.
We changed some of our early methods, but obviously, yes, we did make mistakes, and I think we need to continually admit and confirm that we did make mistakes during this process and even before this process, we made mistakes
at our old church. We made mistakes
about the way we handled things. We thought we were handling them correctly, and it turns out we didn't. And so I would do that differently. I would have approached that differently, and I admit that. And
I own that.
We've apologized to the people that need to be apologized to, but yeah, I wouldn't do it exactly the same way, but I would still do it.
I would still fight the same fight.
Yep. Worth it 100%.
Yep.
So there you go. If any of that sounds interesting to you or fun or exciting, we still have room here. So we would love to see you on Sunday mornings at 10:15 around here. We are also doing meals on Wednesday night starting at 5:30, and then our usual ministries are occurring after the meals that we're having. And your mom, she's been cooking it up, buddy. So join us 10:15 Sunday morning.
Sunday school starts at 9.
Oh yeah, 9 starts Sunday school now. I keep forgetting that. That's things we're doing is Sunday schools now, and 9:00 a.m. And then Wednesdays at 5:30, and we're all the time planning stuff. We're going to participate in Fields of Faith with the FCA next Wednesday, and we're going to pumpkin patches and corn mazes and short-term local missions, and we're going to do some things to impact our little church community and our town community and the surrounding area. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, come join us. We're having a heck of a crazy time around here.
Here we just want people to get connected.
Yep.
We're a connection point.
A point of connection.
Church.
Thank y'all for watching/listening.
Have a good one.
See y'all next time.
Bye.